All right, turning to the study of Ruth. You might remember last week, we ended at chapter 1, verse 18. And you might remember the situation that unfolded. Naomi with her husband Elimelech and their boys, Mahlon and Chilion. You might remember one meant sickly and one meant whining or pining away. Not great names, but they were part of the promised land, God's promise. They had not seen God's promise come through for them yet, and like many of us, we get anxious and we say, God, like, you're not on time, hurry up, right? David, over and over in the Psalm, said, God, hurry up. God, where are you? What are you doing? Well, Elimelech had that same feeling. God, you promised us good, and you're not coming through for us, so we're going to go find good for ourselves. And so they went to Moab. And in Moab, they stay there for about a decade. What happens? Elimelech dies. Mahlon and Chilion both take wives, Orpah and Ruth. Ruth is married to Mahlon. Orpah is married to Chilion. And if you don't remember any of those names, that's okay. You don't have to. There's no test at the end of the message. Those two boys die as well. And so what's happened, they've left God's promise for them. They moved somewhere and said, we're going to take care of ourselves. And for a decade, things just get uglier. Now, Naomi, who's the mom of this clan, says, hey, I think I should probably just go back. The famine that was happening is now lifted, so let me go back to Bethlehem. And she says to her daughters-in-law, guys, just leave. Go back to your families, take care of yourselves, start a new life for yourself. And they say, no, we're going with you. And she says, no, you're not. Actually, stay. And whether she's embarrassed or she's discouraged or all of the above, she finds herself heavy-hearted because she's lost her husband, she's lost her boys, and now the family who set out to say, we're going to take care of ourselves, watch us, watch what we can do, we'll be fine, is now going back to her hometown where people are going to recognize her and recognize Elimelech didn't come back with you, and Mahlon didn't come back with you, and Chilion didn't come back with you. What happened? Tell us the story. And she's probably been eating pints of ice cream every night, right? Because she's in that space. All right, that's whatever you do when you're depressed might be different than what I do when I'm depressed. Is it Snickers? Is it Snickers? Okay. The whole bag, the family fun pack that you can devour in one evening because you're feeling really crummy about yourself. So she's probably put on some weight. She's probably got bigger bags under her eyes. She's a little more gray than she was before. And she's headed back to where she's got to face her family and friends who all go, hey, what happened to your husband and your kids? And wow, how did that work out for you, right? Embarrassing. And so she's telling her daughters-in-law, just leave me. And finally, Orpah, after she's pushed away, says, okay, fine, I'll go back to my family, I'll start a new life. And Ruth makes this incredible statement. You might remember it. It's one of the most famous in the Bible. Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. You remember that? Kind of I just got a touchdown pound on the chest, right? She says, no way, I am sticking with you no matter what. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. I am with you. Quit trying to push me away. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, even if death separates you from me. Ruth says, I am not leaving. You can push me away. You can act discouraged. I don't care how sour you are. God has called me to walk alongside you, and that's what I intend to do. And so Naomi, you might remember we concluded this way. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. Even though the way forward seemed impossible. Ruth doesn't even know what she's getting into. Remember, she's a Moabite. So she's going to a foreign land with her mother-in-law who had it all, lost it all, and is now going back groveling. Is she going to find a job? Is family going to support them? Where are they going to find food to eat? Not only that, they're going on this treacherous journey that's about 50 miles away through the mountains, 2 women alone. Well, thankfully, they make it. And that's where we're going to pick up the story today. But all of us have found ourselves either in that space where you feel like you're in the mush pot, where you feel like you just don't know which way to go, what to do, where to turn, or walking alongside somebody that's in the mush pot. Some of you are in that right now. We might remember that I showed you this painting from 2016 titled Whither Thou Goest, which is a picture of what we've seen. No matter what, Ruth says, I am staying with you. I will be your covering. I am here to help you, to be with you. And here she is committing herself to somebody who's lost it all, who is going back ashamed, embarrassed, discouraged, probably feeling fairly hopeless, saying, well, at least I can find something to eat there. I don't know what I'm going to face. Well, when we face these situations, oftentimes in church we hear scriptures like this from Romans 8:31. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? And we have that rallying cry. Hey, if God is for us, who can be against us? And then we might hear something like this from Psalm 46:7. The Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. He will protect you. He will provide for you. He is on your side. And even though we know that in here sometimes, it's really hard to get it from here or from the scriptures down here into our hearts and really believe it, right? That's the journey. We can know the right thing, but getting it down into our heart is the really tough part. So I have this other picture I thought I'd share with you. We all have dreams, right? And those nice 50s ads gave us those dreams of what life could be if you had the right car, if you had the right house, if you had the right spouse or the right vacuum cleaner. Life would just be perfect, right? And here's an ad. Somebody tell me what kind of car this is. Okay, we'll land with station wagon because nobody knows. Okay, so here we have this beautiful red station wagon. I thought some of you car guys might know it right off the bat. Somebody said DeSoto. So it's an ad for this station wagon. And if you get this station wagon, man, your life is going to be peachy, right? It's going to look really sweet. You are going to have the most handsome husband in the world with the right checkered shirt. Checkered shirts, by the way, are in. Plaid shirts. Your kids will look perfect. They'll be well behaved. Everything will be organized. And we have these ideas of what life should be, don't we? Well, in this situation, if I get married to the right person, then life should look like this. And if we buy the right house, life should look like this. And if I have the right position, life should look like this. And if I find the right church, the perfect church, life should look like this. And if I read my Bible every day like I'm supposed to, and I pray 3 times a day to God, then life should look like this. And we have this idea of what the picturesque scene is supposed to be. And most of the time, every one of us who's over like 14 years old finds that life often looks more like this. So the dream gets contorted somewhere along the way, and it doesn't pan out exactly as we were expecting, exactly as we had pictured, and we find ourselves going, what happened? This thing doesn't even have wheels. It can't even move. What are we supposed to do here? And I know in my head that God is for me. I know He's not against me. And I know if God is for me and He's my fortress, and with Him that I can overcome anything, that we're working from victory, not for victory. But when I find myself in this place, how do I get that from here to here? That's really, really tough. And whether you're walking alongside somebody who's having a hard time saying, this is how life has turned out. This is what I feel like right now, but I had a different dream in mind. I had a different picture in mind. That's where Ruth finds herself walking alongside Naomi. Naomi at some point was like, yes, I'm following my husband. We're going to go to the land of plenty. We're going to find and provide for ourselves. And look, my sons have picked up daughters-in-law. Wow, we're one big happy family. And then the carpet is pulled out from underneath her. And she finds herself headed back to her hometown, embarrassed, ashamed, discouraged, and probably just throw it all up to the wind, whatever. I don't know. And then Ruth is committed to walking alongside somebody in this position. I'm with you no matter what. That's a hard commitment to make, to walk alongside somebody who finds himself in this position or to be in that position. So what character are we looking at this morning? We're looking at the resilient survivor. Now, I say this. I could have called this the survivor. The human body can survive just about anything. God has designed the human body incredibly. We can overcome or get through just about anything. But I don't want to talk about just the survivor. This morning, what I see is the resilient survivor. The survivor that has weeble wobble bounce back. Do you remember weeble wobbles? Weeble wobbles wobble, but they won't fall down. Some of you young people, if you're under 50, you might not remember that. But they were egg-shaped characters. And they were weighted at the bottom. And they were painted like little figures. And no matter what you did with the weeble wobble, it would always bounce back upright. And that's what we're talking about, resilience. Resilient survivor. How do we land on our feet when we've encountered the broken dream? So, you know where we've caught up to Ruth and Naomi. They've decided to take this journey. Ruth says, I'm with you no matter what. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred. Everybody noticed that Naomi was back in town. If you're already feeling guilty and ashamed and embarrassed, and then you've got to walk back into the room, the city, the neighborhood where everybody knows you, where you struck out to do the right thing, and now you're coming back looking a lot different. The whole town was stirred because of them. And the women, thanks women, this often happens, right? Yeah. The women said, can this be Naomi? Yeah. Right? Naomi, is that you? Naomi, you look kind of like Naomi, but you're a little pudgier than you were before. You look a little more disheveled. This happens in the church. Women can be critical. It's true. Men, too, you're not off the hook. Can this be Naomi? You don't look like you used to. You're looking a lot more gray. You're almost recognizable, but you should be back with your husband and your boys. You're back with this stranger that we don't even know. And what does she say in response? Don't call me Naomi. What does Naomi mean? Naomi means pleasant or pleasure, happy, content. She said, don't call me pleasure. Don't call me content. Don't call me pleasant. That's not me. That's not where I'm at. She just has this like heart eruption, right? Don't call me that anymore. That's not who I am. Who you used to know was this pleasant woman who was married to Elimelech and had Mahlon and Chilion with me and these daughters-in-law, and now I'm coming back and I have none of that. That's her response. That's how she pushes back. She says, call me Mara. What does Mara mean? Bitter. Call me bitter because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. Call me angry. Call me upset. Call me depressed because God hasn't been kind to me. You ever felt like that? Anybody? Do you know somebody who's feeling like that right now? Many of us do. She said, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Man, life was good. And now, not so much. Why then call me pleasant? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. God just doesn't like me anymore. I don't know where God is in this whole mess. Remember David saying that over and over again? God, what are you doing? God, where are you? God, why am I in this place? God, I feel like I'm drowning. God, the seaweed has me wrapped around my neck. I'm about to go under. Over and over and over again. I love David because he expresses what's on many of our hearts at these times. And it reminds me that it's okay to put it at God's feet because he's big enough to handle any of this kind of talk. Right. That even when Naomi is saying, man, I'm a mess, God just doesn't like me anymore, God is even bigger than that. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth, her daughter-in-law, who was a Moabite, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. So this would put it about March or April, sometime around there, that time of year, as the barley harvest was beginning. That's how we end chapter 1. So they're back in town. Everybody recognizes, oh, Naomi, you don't look so good. Well, I'm not so good. I'm not very pleasant anymore. I'm just a bitter, angry old woman. And now I've got my daughter-in-law with me. And we've got nothing. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, her husband's family. And his name was Boaz. Boaz, the hero, enters the story, but we don't know he's the hero yet. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. So Ruth, trying to figure out, I don't know how we're going to eat. I don't know where we're going to stay, but I've got to do something. I've committed to being here with my mother-in-law. I've committed to walking alongside her no matter what. I've got to do something. So what's she do? She takes some observation of what's going on around her. She recognizes the barley harvest is happening. Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. Naomi said to her, go ahead. So she's getting approval. She's respecting her elder, even though her elder is in an ugly place. She said, so she went out, she entered a field and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz. Dun, dun, dun. The music changes in this scene, right? She was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. And we learn a little bit about Boaz, and we're going to stop here and continue the rest of the story next week. But we learn a little bit more. Just then, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. And Boaz, who's the boss, he's the big cheese, he's the head honcho, he's the one in charge, he comes into the field, and he says, the Lord be with you, workers. Now, that's a greeting we don't get very often, right? Maybe you do at your work. Maybe you don't. But he walks in. He says, the Lord be with you all. The Lord bless you. The Lord keep you. May God bless you generously, right? He greets them with this blessing from God. The Lord be with you. And they, in response, said, the Lord bless you too, Boaz. So does that tell you they just really hate their boss? No. They absolutely respect him. They like him too. They've got this great relationship going on between them where they know he cares about them and he wants the Lord to bless them. And they, in return, say, hey, and the Lord bless you too. We appreciate you as well. So we learn a lot about Boaz as he just enters the scene from this one little interaction. And Ruth is no dummy. Ruth is no dummy. She's come to a foreign land with no idea how they're going to eat. She goes, well, there's a barley harvest. Well, maybe as they're picking up the barley, whatever falls behind, I can just go pick up those scraps. I know I'm a foreigner, but maybe somebody will have favor on me, and I'll just pick up the scraps. And as that's happening, she's watching, and here comes Boaz into the field. She doesn't know if he's going to come in and say, get out of here. What are you doing grabbing our scraps? Those are our scraps. She doesn't know if the other workers are going to say, leave those alone. We take those home. She's just hoping maybe somebody will show her favor. And she realizes right away, oh, there's something special about this guy because of the way he interacts with his employees and the way the employees interact with their boss. There's something different about this guy. Since I showed you some paintings last week, I thought I'd show you another one. This is the picture we find Ruth in today. Gleaning the fields, the leftovers. This is from Jean-Francois Millet, if I say it right, 1857, The Gleaners. This is a famous one. Many of you have seen this before if you've done any art history class. But she finds herself just picking up scraps. Now, this is not the dream that she probably had when she married Mahlon years before, right? Here are these Israelites come here to marry some of us Moabites. And wow, Elimelech's clan is a pretty nice clan. And Naomi seems like a pretty sweet woman. And Mahlon and Chilion, though they're a little sickly and a little whiny, I think I'll stick with this family, right? So she marries in. Do you think that she thought that shortly thereafter she'd be picking up scraps in a foreign land? Probably not. But she's committed. Remember the committed companion from last week? She's committed herself to walking alongside Naomi no matter what. And so here she is. The dream is not the beautiful station wagon with the 4 well-dressed kids and the matching luggage. This looks very, very different, right? So not only does Naomi find herself in a really bitter space and say, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me bitter. But Ruth also could have said, oh, this is a terrible place to be. We're going to find out that that's not her spirit, but she could have. The first point I want to make this morning is that a resilient survivor looks for opportunity. Not just a survivor, but a resilient survivor looks for opportunity. When you find yourself in the mush pot, when you find yourself discouraged and distraught, what can we do? What's one of those application pieces? To look for opportunity. Why has God placed me here? What gifts and skills do I have? What can I do in this situation? So often when it doesn't turn out like the picturesque ad that we had, and we've got a tree growing through the hood of our car, and we think, this is not right. And me, I don't know about you, but I tend to look inward, and I look in the mirror and go, this stinks. This is terrible. This is not the way I imagine it. God, where are you in this? Ruth shows us something different. She looks around and says, is there an opportunity somewhere? Naomi's not much help right now, is she? Naomi is not doing anything to contribute to this thing. I'm bitter. I'm depressed. I'm a mother-in-law. That's okay. Sorry. 2 people appreciated that one. All of you very sweet mothers-in-law like mine. I'm sorry. That was just a joke. A resilient survivor, one who's not just going to make it through, but one who's going to make it through with vibrancy, with life, looks for opportunity. Well, where do we see that? I'm going to give you 3 steps forward, and then we're going to identify in these 8 verses where we see that. So 3 steps forward, when you are looking for opportunity, what do we do? Right? When it feels like the carpet's been pulled out from underneath us, when everything seems lost, when I feel kind of hopeless, or I'm walking alongside somebody that's in that place, what do we do? Do we just sit there and stare at ourselves and what do they call it, navel gaze and pity party and just whine and whine and whine? We can, and some of us have tried that, and it doesn't get us very far, but we try it anyway, and sometimes we try it again and again and again, and we tell everybody how wrong the world is and how unjust things are and how I've been doing the right thing for so many years, and it just should turn out this way, and when it doesn't, I want to do something different. So we're going to identify 3 steps forward. The first one, take an honest inventory. Take an honest inventory. Let me show you where I see that in Scripture. Take an honest inventory. First thing we recognize, Naomi says, I went away full, I had it all, and I came back empty. Okay, I've got nothing to start with. Nothing. I had it, and I lost it. Second thing we notice, the barley harvest is beginning. Okay, we're taking notes of our situation. We're taking inventory. We're recognizing what's happening around us. Because when I get in the mush pot, I tend to focus on me. I don't often look at the circumstance. Why has God placed me here? What's happening that I haven't seen before? Where do my eyes need to be open? What doors are opening that were closed before? I didn't expect things to turn out this way, but now that I'm here, what can I take note of? So I think Ruth has her head on a swivel. I think she's very sharp. I think she's attentive, and she's recognizing, okay, Naomi doesn't have much to offer me. She's empty. We've got nothing to begin with. But there is something happening in this town. Something is going on here. The whole town is abuzz because the barley harvest is beginning. Everybody's working out there in the fields. She also recognized Naomi's got a relative. Well, Naomi's related to some people around here because she was married to Elimelech. She knows this guy Boaz. And because he's got authority over all of these fields, and the barley harvest is going on right now, and Naomi has nothing, perhaps the relative will show just a little favor on me and see if I can glean something there. She recognized, okay, I'm going to put it all together. She says, I'll just take the leftover. I won't even be a bother to anybody. I'll just take what's left. So she's taking notes, taking inventory. Well, why do I say that? Jesus solved problems this way by taking inventory, or he encourages his disciples to do that. Remember feeding the 5,000 in John 6, Jesus says to Philip, I know these people are hungry. You guys have brought that to my attention. Where do you think we should buy bread for these people to eat? What are our options, he says. Now that we're in this place, and we've got this crowd of hungry people, and it seems like a mess because the disciples told Jesus, just send them all home. Just cancel this event. Tell them to go home and get something to eat. You remember that story? And Jesus says to Philip, well, is there a place we can buy bread around here? Jesus knows the answer, but what's he doing? He's taking some inventory. Do we have any options? He also says this to the other disciples, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. Who brought bread with them? Who got a lunch? Does anybody have anything? Let's just see what we have to work with. So he's taking inventory. What's going on around us? What's in the crowd? What's happening here? Yes, they're hungry. We see the problem. But now let's identify, is there anything we can do about it? How about this one from Mark 9? This is a man who brought his demon-possessed son to Jesus, and he says, can you do something about him? And he tells Jesus the story, and Jesus said, well, how long has he been like this? Tell me the circumstance. Tell me how you got to this place. Tell me why you're here. And then over here, Mark 10, this is a story of a blind man that Jesus healed. He says, what do you want me to do for you? Sometimes all I can do in the middle of the mush pot is complain. What God is asking me to do is to take some inventory. Well, why am I in this place? What's going on around me that I need to recognize that I haven't recognized? What's the need here? What am I expecting God to do in this situation? Where do I expect him to show up? What is it I'm really asking for? Sometimes he brings us through the valleys to allow us, kind of as a filter, to clarify our thoughts, to help us really boil it down to what really matters here. How about this one from Matthew 8? These are the disciples in the middle of the storm. And Jesus says, I know you're in the middle of the storm, but tell me, why are you so afraid here? Why are you so afraid? Is it possible that God could use the valleys, God could use those ugly experiences just to allow us time to reflect, just to boil off all the extra and bring to the surface that which really matters? Guys, do you really have that little of faith? Why are you so afraid in this? Oh, he's trying to get us to depend on him a little bit more in the middle of the storm. How about this one? Another healing. Jesus said, do you believe that I am able to do this? Do you really think I am able in the middle of this situation? Romans 12:3 says it this way, for by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. When you're in this situation, think of yourself, think of your circumstance, think of where I've placed you with sober judgment. Think it through. Take an inventory. What's going on here? What can I do about it? What am I expecting God to do about it? That's not what we want to hear, right? That he allows those difficult situations just to help us think it through, to ask some of these critical questions. But that's a part of it. That's a part of it. One of the steps forward is to evaluate with an honest inventory, to take a sober self-assessment. Here's another step forward. Let go of expected outcomes. Let go of expected outcomes. So when we find ourselves in a difficult space, one of the things we can do that we can actively apply is to take inventory of what's going on around us. What are we expecting of God? What can I do about it? What's the circumstance I'm in? Second one, let go of expected outcomes. Okay, we saw the picture of the nice red station wagon, right? And we all have some of those pictures in our mind, whether it has to do with your marriage or your career or your church or your ministry. We all have these ideas of what things should look like. So often God's got something even better planned for us, and we hang on to those images that he has to pry them away from us so he can. I say it this way sometimes. Sometimes we're so hanging on to the jalopy that's parked in the driveway because we love that car, and that's the car that we're going to restore one day, and it's going to look beautiful one day. And what God has to do sometimes is to take that out of our driveway so he can park something really beautiful there, because he got something even better planned than that old jalopy, but I'm so busy hanging on to that old thing that I don't recognize he's trying to do something newer and better and more incredible than I can imagine for myself. We have to let go in the middle of those situations, let go of the expected outcomes. Why? Because his ways are higher than my ways. His thoughts are not my thoughts. And what I expect to happen is probably less than he can do or imagine. Let me show you that in Scripture. She says, maybe I'll find favor in somebody's eyes. Maybe if I just go out there to glean, I don't know if I'm going to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get grain or not. I hope so. This is not the life I planned. I had hoped that Mahlon was going to provide for us. I thought because he was from the clan of Elimelech that was pretty well off, that I was going to have this kind of life and I'd be a stay-at-home mom. And now I find myself babying my mother-in-law who's just depressed. And I'm over here. I'm going to get on my hands and knees and start picking up the leftover grain. Really? But she didn't have that attitude. She says, well, maybe I'll find favor there. So she's let go of what she expected and what she hoped for and is trusting that God may have something better. How about this from Psalm 46? God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Though everything's going crazy, maybe God will show favor on me. How about this one from Isaiah? I just shared it from the prophet Isaiah. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, he's saying from the Lord. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Why? Because the God who is able to create this whole thing, who is able to create life from scratch, who is able to bring light to the darkness, who is able to create the sun, the moon, and the stars, who knows everybody by name and knows the number of the hairs on their head, probably knows a little bit more about interpersonal relationships than I do. Probably has a deeper understanding of what's good for me than even I do. And sometimes I think, well, I'm the expert on me. Right? We're all the expert on us. You know yourself better than anybody else except for God. He knows even more what you need than you know what you need. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your thoughts. As far as the heavens are, my thoughts are that much bigger than yours. You see, I see the grand picture, and you see today. You see this week. You see this minute. You see this segment of life. But I see what's best for you in the grand scheme. My ways are higher than your thoughts, and my thoughts than your thoughts. James 4 says it this way. Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that. Those of you who make really good plans, and there's nothing wrong with planning so long as we hold them loosely. Today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Do any of us have plans? Every one of us has plans, right? Some of you have plans of where you're going to lunch today and who you're going to have lunch with and what game you're going to watch today. And if you're not going to watch the game, then you're just boring. I'm sorry. Spoken from a football guy. Okay. You're not boring. I'm boring. Okay. Those who have plans carry on business and make money. Why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. You don't even know if the sun's going to shine tomorrow or if it's going to be raining. You're making all these plans about hanging out and having that picnic in the park. You don't even know if it's going to be 75 degrees or if it's going to be 55 degrees in a hailstorm. You don't know. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Whoa, perspective. Okay, James, give it to me straight, right? What is your life? It's here and then it's gone. And God's big scheme, it's here and then it's gone. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, right? Humble yourself. Get it through your thick skull that he's a little bit smarter than we are. James continues, instead you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, if God so wills, God, if you want this to happen, it'll happen. God, if you don't want this to happen, no matter how much I try to will it to happen, no matter how much I try to manipulate it, no matter how much I try to force it, it will not happen. But if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. So is there anything wrong with making plans? No. But we hold those things loosely and say, Lord, if you've got a better plan, you take control. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, if you know what you should do, if you've taken an honest inventory and you know, hey, there's an opportunity to glean over here. And gleaning, right now we're talking about harvesting, but every one of us needs to be a gleaner, right? A gleaner of information, a gleaner of wisdom, a gleaner of knowledge, a gleaner of the Holy Spirit's direction. Every one of us should be gleaning. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do because they've gleaned some insight by taking an honest inventory and doesn't do it, that's wrong. That's wrong. We have to let go of expected outcomes and make a move. And that leads us to our third point. Do the next right thing. Do the next right thing. So I've taken an honest inventory, letting go of what I think should happen, and then I've got to take the next step. So often God gives us one step at a time, doesn't he? And I think, okay, God, here's the pathway. I've got it all mapped out for you. Let's go this way and that way and this way. And along this way, I'm going to pick up a wife and I'm going to pick up some kids and I'm going to have a great car. I'm going to have a Corvette that my 4 family can fit into. And we're going to have a house and it's going to look like this. We're going to be members of our church and we'll be involved and everything's going to look perfect. God, just do it that way. Right? God, I've got it mapped out for you. But what he's asking us to do is just take one step in the right direction. Do the next right thing. See, if we're holding things loosely and we're allowing him to dictate the outcome, and I'm letting go of my expected outcome and saying, God, I want whatever you have for me. God, I want whatever you want from this situation. I'm just going to take the next step. Well, what's the next step for Ruth? The next step for Ruth is just, okay, I'll go out there and see if I can glean something. I don't even know if anybody's going to let me, but I'm just going to try it. I mean, I know this guy's related to my mother-in-law, so at least maybe they'll show some favor on me. Maybe the other workers won't be intimidated or threatened by me, and they'll just let me have some scraps. So I'm just going to take one step in the right direction. What I know is if I can glean some of that, we'll have something to eat for today. Where do we see that? She went out. She actually did something. She not only took inventory, released some of those expected outcomes. That doesn't mean she didn't have to grieve the loss of what she wanted there. Do we have to grieve the loss of what we want, of our big dream sometimes? Yes. And I think the Lord's okay with that. So long as we hold it loosely and not try to force him to make my dream come true. I say, God, I was hoping for this, and I'm a little disappointed. I think that's healthy. So she let go of expected outcomes, and then she does something. She does the next right thing. Does she know where this is going to go? No. She doesn't even know if they're going to let her do it. But she knows, well, the harvest is happening. Naomi's not going to do anything about it. We're related to this guy, so maybe I'll try this. And she takes one step in the right direction. She went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. She did the next right thing. So often, when I'm in the middle of the mush pot and I think the world is falling, the sky is falling, I don't know how to get out of this mess. What God is trying to get me to do is to trust him so much so that after I've taken inventory of my circumstance and I let go of what I imagined it was supposed to be, he's just saying, can you just trust me today? And tomorrow he's going to say, can you just trust me today? He's probably not going to unroll the whole story for me. Why? Because my finite brain can't comprehend what his massive brain can. How about this from Proverbs 21? To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. To do the next right thing. To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. That brings more glory to him than sacrifice. Haughty eyes and a proud heart. Haughty eyes, the rolling eyes, and a proud heart. I'm too good for this. I never imagined I would be in this place. Do we feel that way sometimes? Yes, we can all admit that. The unplowed field of the wicked produce sin. Don't do nothing, do something. Look for the next right thing to do. How about this from Matthew 4? So when Jesus called his disciples, first of all, he calls Simon and Andrew, or Peter and Andrew. At once, they left their nets and followed him. At once, they left their nets and followed him. They did the next right thing. Did they know what they were getting into? No, this guy just told us we're going to fish for men. What that means, I have no clue. But we know there's something about this Jesus, and he's just called us into service, and so we're going to do the next right thing by just dropping everything and taking that step in the right direction. And then with James and John, the same thing. Immediately, they did the next right thing. Immediately, they left the boat and their father and followed him. And then later on in Luke 5, this is Matthew, also known as Levi, got up and left everything and followed him. What's the next right thing? I'm going to take a step in Jesus' direction. He's calling me to follow him. I'm going to take a step that way. How about this from Mark 1, verse 31? So he came and took her by the hand, lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her. This is Peter's mother-in-law. Peter's mother-in-law who is sick, and Jesus comes to visit, and he comes and he touches her. She's healed, and what's the very first thing she does, the very next step? She served them. she does the next right thing upon being healed. How about this from John 4, verse 50? Go, Jesus replied, your son, this is the royal family, had said, hey, our son has died. Come heal him. And Jesus said, go, your son will live. And what did the man do? No, come back with me and heal him. No, he obeyed. He did the next right thing. And what does he find out the very next day? His servants come and meet him on the road back. And they said, hey, man, at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, your son woke up. Your son is not dead. And he goes, that's the exact same time that Jesus told me to go. The exact same time that he said, your son will live. What does Jesus tell him to do? Go. And immediately he does the next right thing. Friends, when God has us in that space, it's not easy. I'm not telling you just like, hey, God's going to work everything out together for the good of those that love him. Go, see ya, have a good time figuring that out. But I am telling you that sometimes he brings us through the valley to take us to the mountaintop. And to do that when we're in the valley or when we're walking alongside somebody who's in the valley, the first thing we have to recognize is that I need to take an inventory of why I'm here in the first place. What am I expecting? What do I want? What am I thinking should happen? And am I holding that loosely? And am I willing to just take one step in the right direction when God reveals what that step is? See, a resilient survivor looks for opportunity. A resilient survivor recognizes that God uses every single situation to further his cause. And my role in that, whether I'm in it or I'm walking alongside somebody who's in that place, is to recognize what's going on here. Where's the opportunity? What is he trying to do in this space? Some of you have heard this story before of the man who was in a town and the dam broke and the city was flooding. And they said, everybody get out. He says, well, I've got this idea of what God should do. God's going to rescue me. Don't you worry about me. And so a big truck with big wheels, you know, the kind that really insecure people drive, drove down the street. You know, water's a couple feet up. It's up the porch. It's starting to come into the house. And the guy says, don't you worry about me. They say, come on, get in the back of the truck. We'll take you to safety. He says, don't you worry about me. God's got me. The truck says, okay. He drives on, gets somebody else who wants to help. Water goes all the way past the first story. This guy's up in the second story of his house. Somebody comes by in a boat. Say, get on the boat. Come on, we'll drive you to safety. The man says, no, God's got me. I've got this. Don't worry about me. The water continues to rise. The only thing sticking up out of his house is the chimney, and he's sitting on the top of it. Helicopter comes by, drops a rope ladder down. Come on. Get on. We're going to take you to safety. He says, no, God's got me. God's got me. Helicopter flies away. Waters continue to rise. The guy doesn't make it. Finds himself in heaven. A couple of the angels say, hey, what happened? He says, well, God is going to rescue me. He's supposed to rescue me. God butts in and he says, I sent you a truck, and I sent you a boat, and I sent you a helicopter, and you didn't take those opportunities. Well, it's a silly story that 3 of you laughed at. But the big picture is, sometimes we have our own idea of what it should look like. Sometimes we say, well, God's going to make it happen this way. Why? Because I've designed it that way, and God should be on board with me. And what he's saying is, no, you let go of that. You let go of the expected outcome. Take inventory where I've got you, and you take the next right step in the right direction. So how do we encourage those people around us that are going through the mush pot? We help them. Help them assess. When you're in the middle of the mush pot, it's hard to take inventory. It's hard to take an honest assessment of yourself. And so we can love them well by saying, well, here's what I see in you, and here's an opportunity I see. And we want to do that lovingly, right? Not like, hey, just slap them upside the head and say, do this, right? No, but we want to come alongside them and say, here's what I see, here's what I recognize. Or if you're in the middle of that, just sit there and take some notes. Ruth took notes, I think. Ruth recognized what was going on around her, and she took an honest inventory. Help them to let go of their expected outcome. That's hard to do. Well, how can we do that? Well, listen, what did you want to have happen? We can help them grieve that process of letting go. I'm sorry that didn't work out that way. Do you think that it's possible that God might have something even better for you? Sometimes we have to do that for ourselves, right? Write it out. God, I really wanted this thing to happen, and it didn't, and I'm really discouraged because of that. And then, as we come alongside those people, or if we're the one there, we just take the next right step. Well, what's the next right step? Well, talk to God, right? What is God asking me to do in this situation? Can we encourage them to take just one step in the right direction? Can we, when we're there, just take one step in the right direction? I don't have to have it all figured out. I don't have to have all the answers, but maybe I can just move forward one step at a time. So often I think that's what God's asking us to, right? That's what faith is taking one step at a time and trusting him with the outcome. Amen? So often when that happens, that's when God decides, oh, you're letting go of what you imagined should be. You've taken an inventory, you've thought reflectively, and you're moving forward in faith. And that's when so often Boaz shows up. That's when we start to get out of the mush pot, is when we take those 3 steps in the right direction. I told you, this is where the music changes in this story. Dun, 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 he arrives. Just then, after all of that happened, just then Boaz arrives from Bethlehem. Heavenly Father, you